Chapter 1: The Battle of the Great Mountains. The great mountains loomed high in the distance, dividing the land of Azura in half. On the western side lay the kingdom of Solari, a land of warmth and light, ruled by the Sun King. On the eastern side lay the kingdom of Lunari, a land of magic and mystery ruled by the Moon Queen. For centuries, the two kingdoms had been at war, their armies clashing in fierce battles that left the land scarred and broken. Prince Adrian of Solari rode at the head of his troops, his sword held high, and his armor shining in the bright sun. He was a skilled warrior, trained from birth in the art of combat, and he was determined to lead his soldiers to victory. Adrian had always been loyal to his kingdom and his king, and he would stop at nothing to defend them from their enemies. The army of Solari marched across the rolling hills, their banners flapping in the wind. Adrian surveyed his troops with pride, noting the ranks of archers, the lines of swordsmen, and the formations of cavalry. They were a formidable force, and Adrian knew that they could win this battle. As they neared the great mountains, Adrian signaled for his troops to stop. He could see the Lunari army waiting for them on the other side of the pass, their banners and shields glinting in the light of the setting sun. Adrian drew his sword, and his troops followed suit. The air was tense with anticipation. With a shout, Adrian urged his troops forward, and they charged towards the enemy. The clash of swords and the sound of screams filled the air, as the two armies collided in a brutal and bloody conflict. Adrian fought with all his might, his sword flashing in the sunlight. He cut down enemy soldiers left and right, his armor protecting him from their blows. He saw Lunari soldiers falling all around him, their bodies piling up on the ground. But as the battle raged on, Adrian found himself separated from his troops. He was alone, surrounded by enemy soldiers. Despite his skill, he knew that he was outnumbered and outmatched. He cried out and charged bravely and was immediately overwhelmed. And then, everything went dark. Adrian slowly came to consciousness, his head pounding and his vision blurred. He realized that he was no longer on the battlefield, but in a dimly lit cell. The sound of dripping water echoed through the room, and the walls were made of rough-hewn stone. He was disarmed, his armor and weapons taken away from him, and he was chained to the wall. Adrian tried to pull the chains, but they were too strong. He looked around, searching for a way to escape. The cell was small and barren, with no windows or doors. He was trapped. He tried to move, but his body was sore and his limbs felt heavy. He groaned and leaned against the wall, trying to focus his thoughts. As his senses cleared, Adrian could hear the sound of footsteps approaching. He stood up, readying himself for a fight. A tall and muscular figure entered the cell, the man's bright green eyes seeming to sparkle with mischief even in the sparse light of the dungeon. He was dressed in a black leather tunic and tight-fitting pants, and his hair was wild and unruly, falling in thick black waves around his shoulders.
"Good morning, Prince Adrian,"
the mysterious man said, his voice dark and husky.
"I trust you slept well."
Adrian scowled, his hands balling into fists despite the chains.
"What do you want, Lunari scum?"
he growled. The man smirked.
"My name is Theron, and you, my dear prince, are my prisoner."
Adrian struggled against his chains, but they held him fast. He glared at Theron.
"What do you want with me?"
Theron circled him slowly, toying with him.
"Oh, I want nothing from you, little prince,"
he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm.
"except, perhaps, a little entertainment."
Adrian's eyes narrowed, his fists clenching in frustration. He was used to being in control, used to being the one who called the shots. But now, he was at the mercy of his captor, and he hated it. Theron circled him once more, and Adrian followed his every move, never taking his eyes off him. He could see the way Theron's eyes lingered on his body, the way he seemed to be studying him with interest.
"What are you looking at?"
Adrian spat, his voice laced with anger. Theron grinned, a wicked glint in his eyes.
"Just admiring the view."
Adrian felt a shiver run down his spine, but he refused to show any weakness.
You won't get away with this.
Theron's expression turned dark.
Oh. But I already have. And soon, you'll be begging for my mercy.
Adrian snarled, his blue eyes flashing with anger.
I'll never beg to the likes of you.
Theron's grin widened, and he stepped closer, his breath hot on Adrian's face.
We'll see about that.
And then he turned and walked out of the cell, leaving Adrian alone in the darkness. Adrian spent what felt like hours pacing back and forth in his cell, his mind racing with thoughts of escape and revenge. He examined his chains, but they were thick and unyielding, impossible to break free from. He searched the walls and floor for any weaknesses, but found none. As he paced, he thought of his family and his kingdom, and he wondered what they were doing now. He hoped that they were safe, that the Lunari army had not attacked them in his absence. Just when he was beginning to lose hope, he heard footsteps approaching. He tensed, readying himself for a fight, but when the door to his cell opened, he was surprised to see Theron standing there, holding a tray of food.
Good evening, little prince.
Theron said, his voice smooth and seductive.
I hope you're hungry.
Adrian eyed him warily, his mind still focused on escape.
What is this?
He asked, his voice laced with suspicion. Theron chuckled.
Just a simple offer of food and drink. You must be starving after all that fighting.
Adrian hesitated, his stomach rumbling. He realized that he was indeed famished, and he knew that he needed to keep his strength up if he wanted to escape. He nodded, and Theron set the tray down on the floor. Adrian approached cautiously, eyeing the food suspiciously. But when he took a bite, he found that it was surprisingly delicious. He ate quickly, his hunger overwhelming his fear. As he ate, Theron watched him with interest, studying him with a keen eye. Adrian could feel his gaze on him, and he wondered what the Lunari was thinking. When he finished eating, Adrian sat in silence, his thoughts racing as he waited for Theron to leave. However, to his surprise, Theron lingered, leaning against the wall and watching him with a curious expression.
I'm surprised you're not trying to kill me,
Adrian said, breaking the silence. Theron smirked.
Oh, believe me, I thought about it.
He said, his voice dripping with amusement.
But I have my orders, and I must follow them.
Adrian raised an eyebrow.
Orders? From whom?
Theron shrugged.
The Moon Queen, of course. She's quite fond of collecting prisoners of war.
Adrian's expression turned grim at Theron's words. He knew that the Moon Queen was a ruthless ruler, and he had heard stories of the atrocities committed by her army. He wondered what fate awaited him now that he was in her grasp.
And what does she plan to do with me?
He asked, his voice low. Theron shrugged.
Who knows? She might use you as a bargaining chip. Or she might simply execute you.
He said, his tone casual. Adrian felt a cold knot form in his stomach at the thought of being executed. He had always known that being a prince meant putting himself in danger, but he had never expected to end up in this situation. At that moment, the door of the cell burst open and 2 Lunari soldiers came in.
Get up, prisoner,
one of them said, his voice gruff. Theron clucked his tongue.
Looks like she's decided then. How exciting.
The dark humor in Theron's voice sent shivers down his spine as the soldiers unchained Adrian and dragged him from the cell. They walked him down winding hallway after hallway. Adrian took note of his surroundings, memorizing the twists and turns in case he ever had to make a run for it. Finally, they arrived at a large chamber, guarded by a pair of massive doors. The soldiers pushed Adrian inside, and he found himself face to face with the Moon Queen herself. She was a tall, regal woman with long, silver hair and piercing blue eyes. She wore a gown of midnight blue, adorned with sparkling jewels. Adrian felt a sense of awe and fear wash over him as he gazed upon her.
Greetings, Prince of the Solari.
The Moon Queen said, her voice cold and calculating.
I trust you have been treated well.
Adrian swallowed, trying to keep his voice steady.
As well as can be expected.
He said, his words measured. The Moon Queen studied him for a moment, her eyes piercing.
You are a valuable prize, Solari Prince. Surely, your father will do anything to get you back.
Adrian clenched his jaw, refusing to show any weakness.
My father will stop at nothing to defeat your kingdom.
The Moon Queen smiled, a cold, cruel expression.
We shall see about that. But for now, I have a task for you.
Adrian tensed, wondering what the Moon Queen had in store for him. He knew that nothing good could come of it.
You are to be presented to my court.
The Moon Queen said, gesturing to the soldiers.
You will be given new clothes and made presentable. You are to show my people that even the mightiest warriors of Solari can be brought to their knees.
Adrian felt a sense of dread wash over him as he realized what was happening. He knew that he was being paraded around like a trophy, a symbol of Lunari's victory over Solari. But he had no choice but to go along with it. He followed the soldiers out of the chamber, wondering what his fate would be in this strange and dangerous land.